Uh, Corn dropping and soybeans going higher this Friday with weather, a highlight weather in the United States. The rainfall wasn't extensive and weather issues in Canada. Jerry Gidel is going to comment about that right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Jerry, how are you today? So, how are you seeing this Friday close?
Well, considering where we were at last Friday and after the crop report, and that we've had quite a turnaround here in all commodities, and that actually suddenly of all things, our friend the wheat market has been part of this rally from the standpoint that the Canadian weather conditions, people really started zeroing in on the fact that the rains up that way have been poor. And then this week's forecasted rains was not really going to be in that part of North America. And so that really started to set the tone, and the fact that we kind of pushed past the Kansas wheat harvest. And that usually is kind of one of the traditional bottoms in the U.S. Winter wheat markets and that. And also, I think people started to actually focus on the fact that the spring wheat crop that's in our northern plains really was quite a shocker. They're taking 15, 17 bushels out of the U.S. average yield. I think even myself, I was kind of surprised that they would do that. And at this point, we don't need that phone from there. So the activity here in today's market has got that tone. And then as the week went on here, we started getting more and more commentary around the world on various spots about conditions about corn and soybeans and that. And so, that being said, the market activity here definitely kind of found a base and then started to react back to these markets across the board.
Yes, and one of those places that we are seeing changes is South America because we are seeing the Brazilian corn crop being reduced and the low levels of the Paraná River in Argentina.
Definitely, well, we've had that issue pop up before in Argentina, but it seems to have got back to a pretty critical point right now because of the fact we've had limited moisture in that whole general area of southern Brazil and that drains into the Paraná River and into across the most major ports of departure there in Argentina with Rosario and that. And to some extent, the soybean crop is also been dinged a little bit on this thing from early activity. The corn crop in Argentina has seemed like it's responded to some better conditions in the second crop that they plant after the wheat harvest. But the real twist continues to be is that we had the dry conditions that delayed our Brazilian crop. We then had kind of up and down growing conditions. Then we had a big flood in Mato Grosso when they were trying to harvest. Then they turned around and really didn't get much rain in Paraná and the southern producing areas. And the second crop of corn has really taken a beating with just this last week. We did have the freeze situation come in and nick that crop again. More and more commentary. And actually in the last day or two, there's been a lot of concern being raised from the exporters down there that there might not be enough corn to meet some of the contracts. And there has been some contracts washed out from producers to the exporters because they can point to the fact that the crop out there in their area is just not as strong as they anticipate. And the interesting thing about that, some of these contracts were put out last winter, not this recent winter. They were put out there the winter before. There was lots of optimism, 2 years ago when the Chinese and were out here pushing around for beans and corn, and they made some of those contracts. So, it's been a difficult time for that. That's added to it from there. And the real twist of what we're talking about, the soybean area right now, and that in South America, is the fact that, okay, we've had a pretty good crop down there. But in the Canadian world is the fact that, yes, the wheat crop has been beat up a little bit here because of weather, but canola / rapeseed is right there is a world producer of a oil seed in that, and the soybean oil, which has been a strong commodity all year because of the biodiesel and the veg oil usage and energy, and that is now all of a sudden being threatened again. There's talk that even with the higher planted acreages, that this year's Canadian canola crop could be 2 to 3 million metric tons less than last year right now. And if the weather is as stout as they look like it's going to be for the coming week to 10 days, it could be even lower than that. So there's some real twists going on here in this thing, trying to keep your head look in the right direction as to what's influencing these markets, because the corn and soybeans in the U.S. are important, but the world is also an important area of production, and particularly with the forecast for the U.S. to see this ridge move back into the Midwest, or really the plains for sure, and parts of the Midwest this coming week, so that's really got things kind of in the background, giving us support to this week's corn and soybean prices.
Yes, and how are you seeing the wheat market that has been impacted by the harvest in the United States?
Well, the U.S. Winter wheat harvest has come through with pretty solid progress, which is not solid yields in that, both in soft red and in hard red, and the USDA kind of pointed that out in their most recent numbers in that. But the twist of it is that we had such a sharp decline of, well, from year over year. Now, this is not from what people were expecting a month or 6 weeks ago, and that, but the reality is that it was over 200 million bushels less, and that really starts to tighten up our carryover stock in the U.S. Now, the biggest problem, the biggest thing involved with wheat, though, is what are things doing in two primary areas of the world, and the Black Sea is one of them, and the other one is the European Union. The European Union has a tremendous advantage in transportation to some of the more important markets of the world in wheat, which is North Africa, right across the Mediterranean, and then also into the Mideast markets. Egypt has a very strong connection to the Black Sea, but in general, their outputs in that, if they have sizable supplies, then the price of wheat will be kind of determined by that. The one twist of it here in the U.S. is that we're looking to be a real strong user of wheat as a feed source, and that to keep some of these carryover stocks pretty small from where they have been in the last 5 years. But that's the twist of that is that if have any further problems here, because right now the U.S. crop is kind of twisted. It's we've got good one kind and kind of bad the other. Canadian crop's going to be lower. Australia crop is going to be lower just because they had an unbelievable crop last year. If that turned around, or Argentina, then we could start to have some more excitement in the wheat on a nation or a worldwide basis. But it's going to be a positive for us in the impact of where the Canadians are at this point, and seasonally, so that we don't have the kind of weight of the harvest going on here in the U.S. to kind of impact the wheat price in the short term. So the corn and soybeans are going to be looking at what the weather is going to be doing to them. And we're approaching one of the big important times in the U.S. for weather's influences on the corn crop, because pollination is going to really be ramping up the next 2 weeks.
Yes, I wanted to ask about the Delta variant. We thought that the coronavirus virus crisis in the US was pretty much fading, but well, not right now. And a lot of people are talking again that the US dollar would be a safe haven, and that would mean a shift again to grains coming out of the emerging markets.
Totally understand that. You're exactly right about the Delta variant, which is the Indian variation that's popped up over the last month. Well, it's been around for about 2 months, but its impact in the U.S. has really ramped up in the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's, interestingly enough, it's unfortunate that it's with the number of people that have not taken any kind of vaccines, and that is where it's hitting them the hardest here. And that even California, I heard, was talking about reinstituting the wearing of mask and that in public again. And boy, that's a tough one. Boy, we really, it could be a big factor in the psychology of this thing, and it could end up. The one thing is part of this whole thing is that people have got so used to going out to restaurants and bars and things like that after not doing that for 12 to 16 months, and unfortunately that we do need everyone to cooperate and get the vaccine. So yeah, I understand that there's some religious ideas to that this is a wrong thing to do, but vaccines are not something that's going to kill you. They're going to help you be a better person in the society. Hopefully that idea comes across, and maybe this little flare up in the U.S. will prompt more people to get the vaccine, and this thing will kind of slow down a little bit here. We sure don't need that situation. And you're exactly right about the value of the dollar and things like that, and its influence on a worldwide basis. It's all tied into the economics and the general optimism of the country at times. And right now we're kind of getting beat up again.
Yes, when things get tough, people around the world usually buy US dollars, and people in the United States usually buy gold. And what are you seeing from your friends?
Well, the gold market has got it. There's always people enthusiastic about the gold market, and that it has its own followers of things along the way. I'm not saying that I'm a real good gold bug and keep an eye on that value as much as some other people do at this point. But I'd say that when there's uncertainty happening, the gold always finds some friends, and I think that it's probably finding some stability in this kind of environment. Are we at? I don't sense that we're in a situation. I think the other interesting thing is happening. There's been a lot of fear of inflation rearing its ugly head because of actually of all things, the expansion of demand that maybe our society isn't ready to provide in the short term because of the reactions of getting people back to work and there's people out there who have money to spend, and yet some of the goods and services that we've provided over previously in that are not available in that. And it's been a little bit of an interesting struggle to get all the workforce back to from restaurants to other things. Most of the manufacturing kind of hung together during the whole thing, but the service industries are really still struggling to get enough people together to provide all the services they've had in the past. And so that's creating a higher price level for things as we go along. I myself don't sense this as a long-term situation, but it's definitely grabbing people's attention, and interestingly enough, the inflation ideas, we've had so little of it for so long. Maybe I'm immune to the idea that it could get as bad as it was in the 1970s. I was just coming out of college at that point, and it was, I don't know, different world then than it is now, but it's a scenario where the markets definitely can still remember some of the wild and crazy things that happened back then.
And what are you expecting from next week?
Well, I'd say that the weather situation as it's forecasted right now is going to be our major thing to watch from there. I think the one thing maybe that will be a kind of interesting is that we had, this time last week or early over the weekend, there was really an attitude that there was going to be a tremendous amount of moisture and rainfall go across the Midwest, starting in South Dakota and moving through the Minnesota, northern Iowa, and then into the East Coast. And that we had some rains, but interestingly enough, example thereof is that here in northern Illinois, and that they forecasted pretty substantial rains for 3 nights in a row. Last night, this is the last night they were forecasting, we finally got an inch rain. So that's inch rains are important, and we needed it because interestingly enough, we hadn't had one for 10 days or so of that amount. And this time of year, you really do need a pretty regular basis if you're not build up. Now, guess what? I've heard commentary from people that have clients in the central Illinois like I do, and a whole different world if you're down there in the kind of the heart of Illinois, Bloomington, Decatur, Springfield, Champaign. They get way too much moisture, and there's people talking about, of course, the corn and soybeans. There's the drainage world isn't always perfect, so you've got ponds out there. But I've also heard people talking about just the soybean crop at this point is looking yellow, a little bit brown, things like that. Even if it's higher than it was a couple months ago, or a couple weeks ago, I should say. And that the twist of it is that soybeans are a crop that isn't really positive about having heavy above normal precip in its soil. It is not a crop that thrives on that situation. So it's the one particularly if you get any kind of moisture that's up on the plant for any length of time, the oxygen level of the crop just kills it, and so there's lots of things that are bouncing around in here, and we're going to be watching them closely. Actually, I want to also let our people know that I and some other people will be out looking at the crops in central Illinois here the weekend of July 31st to do our kind of annual tour that we do, and that kind of go over the same old places we always go. But we try to think this is useful to people because we're kind of looking at one of the most productive areas of the country and see how things look before the August crop report. To some extent, the market activity, it's definitely not as extensive as some of the other tours are taken and all that kind of stuff. But last year it revealed that the central Illinois area's plant populations were down because of the weather we'd had earlier in the spring. I think it's going to also be important this year is to see in what kind of yields potential is there based upon the ear's length and the ear's rows around. And that's something that will be available to us in a couple, 3 weeks or early part of August after we make this tour. So that's something to keep in mind for people. And we'll see what the info has as we go from kind of south and a little bit west of Chicago down into the heart of Illinois' corn and soybean country.
We are eager to see that. Thank you, Jerry.
Mm-hmm. You have a great weekend, sir, and we'll see what the old weather maps have to say for next week when they get there on Sunday night.